Welcome to the Maria Liberati Show, where food meets art, travel, and life. What does food mean to you? This is Maria Liberati. Stay tuned for this week's episode. I feel like I should say the British are coming, the British are coming. We have Janina Doyle, who is joining us from the UK, and she is a British wine expert. She's going to share with us some tips and recommendations on the best British wines that you should be trying. And we also have author Robert Boog, who is the author of a really interesting book called Shakey's Madness. And it poses an interesting theory about Shakespeare. And I'm going to let Robert explain that to us and tell us all about the book. And we're in the month of August. It's the 8th month of the year and the 6th month of the ancient Roman calendar. Since we're on the subject of the UK for most of the episode today, did you know that August 1st was once called Lammas Day, and it was the Thanksgiving time or harvest time in Britain? The festival of Lammas marked the beginning of the harvest, when people used to go to church to give thanks for the first corn to be cut. On Lammas Day, farmers made loaves of bread from the new wheat crop and gave them to their local church. They were then used as the communion bread during a special mass, thanking God for the harvest. That custom ended when Henry VIII broke away from the Catholic Church, and nowadays in Great Britain they have harvest festivals at the end of the season. Michaelmas Day, that's in September, that's September 29th. That's traditionally the last day of the harvest season. Lammas was also the time for farmers to give their farm workers a present of a pair of gloves. In Exeter, in the UK, a large white glove was put on the end of a long pole, which was decorated with flowers and held on high to let people know that the merriment of the Lammas Fair was beginning. A superstition from the Lammas Fair and Lammas time of year was to bring good luck. Farmers would let the first cornbread go stale and then crumble it over the corners of their barns. And that was to bring good luck. So there you go. And did you know that on August 27th, 55 BC, that's the year 55 BC, that's the official date for the Roman landing in Great Britain by Julius Caesar, accompanied by 10,000 men of the 7th and 10th Roman legions. Oh, and one last important date, August 6th, the sandwich was named after the Earl of Sandwich. It is said that in approximately 1762, August 6th, the Earl of Sandwich asked for meat to be served between slices of bread to avoid interrupting a gambling game. And hope your month of August goes well and you're enjoying these last beautiful days of summer. And don't forget to, while you're enjoying the rest of the summer, don't forget to share and like this month, the month of August episodes, for your chance to be entered in a giveaway for absolutely gluten-free products. Absolutely Gluten-Free makes some really delicious gluten-free products. I know you'll love them. Whether you eat gluten-free or not, the products are just really delicious. So you're going to like, share, or place a review on Apple Podcasts and take a screenshot of the review and share that on social media. And you'll also be entered for a giveaway in a drawing for absolutely gluten-free products and a copy of one of my books from the Basic Art of Italian Cooking book series. And you can find my books on the basicartofitaliancooking.com, marialiberati.com, artoflivingprimamedia.com, and really anywhere books are sold. So there are so many interesting theories out there about Shakespeare and his works. And Robert Boog, who I mentioned, is one of our guests today. But I happen to be in Italy in the year 2011, and I heard a really interesting presentation. And again, this was just a presentation that a retired professor had made at the Turin Book Fair in Italy. This is another theory about Shakespeare. So follow this. He presented research at the book fair in Turin, Italy in 2011, claiming that William Shakespeare was also known as Michelangelo Florio, and that he happened to have really been born in Sicily, and that his family was forced to flee England because of his father publishing writings against the Vatican. So they were basically exiled. And that was how he became the British bard. He came from an aristocratic family. His father was Giovanni Florio, and ultimately he took his mother's name and translated it into English. So his mother's name was Guglielmo Crollanza. Crollanza, if you translate that into English, means Shakespeare. And they added an E at the end, and voila, you have the way the name is spelled, Shakespeare. And again, this is a theory that was presented in a paper at the book fair in Turin, Italy in 2011. So the first name William comes from a young cousin that was born in England and died young. His mother was a cousin of Guglielma and had already translated her last name to Shakespeare, but named her young son William. That William died very young. So upon the arrival of young Michelangelo Florio, also known as the Bard, into Stratford-on-the-Avon, he took the name of his deceased cousin, William Shakespeare. Also, it's eerily noted that Shakespeare, at the age of 16, while traveling throughout Europe, supposedly fell in love with a girl named Giulietta. Giulietta means Juliet in English, and his family opposed the union. Giulietta was so distraught that she committed suicide. Does the story bring to mind a balcony Verona, and one named Romeo? Well, if you need to sit down to digest this theory, have a glass of Marsala wine with this traditional Sicilian cannoli recipe that I'm going to share here, while reading more about the real bard and also listening to more about the real bard, another theory that Robert Boog is going to share with us. So this recipe uses a typical dessert wine made in Sicily known as Marsala. The Florio family is a famous Marsala making family, and who knows, maybe Michelangelo Florio, aka William Shakespeare, may be a relative, according to the theory that was presented at the book fair in Turin, Italy in 2011. So in my recipe, I do have the recipe to make a cannoli shell. And if you're going to do that, you're going to need the cannoli forms to make these. So many gourmet stores sell them. If you cannot find them, send me an email at maria@marialiberati.com and I'll let you know where you can find them. So to make the cannoli shell, you need a cup of flour, 1.5 tablespoons of butter, 1.5 tablespoons of sugar, 1 egg white, 2 tablespoons of dry Marsala wine. And you're going to need oil for frying, which can be canola oil or peanut oils. They work the best. Melt the butter and place the butter in a bowl, and then blend in sugar, flour, and Marsala wine a little bit at a time. You're going to mix this by hand until you've gotten a smooth but firm dough. Let that stand for about 15 minutes. Roll it out. Cut to round circular discs that are about 4 inches in width. Heat the oil in a deep frying pan or fryer. You're going to oil the cannoli forms and then place the dough, the discs that you've made. Place them on top around the form. And what you're going to do is close the opening of the cannoli where the dough meets and place the beaten egg white to firm the closure. Fry the shell till golden. When they're golden, remove them and let them drain on paper towels. For the filling is really simple. 2 cups of ricotta cheese, freshly made if possible, 1 cup of powdered sugar, 16 ounces of dark chocolate pieces, or you can buy the really large pieces of dark chocolate and cut that into small pieces or little bits. It should be 65% cocoa, at least 65% cocoa or more. Place the ricotta in a bowl, add in the sugar and chocolate pieces, blend with a wooden spoon till well blended. Once your shells are cool, you're going to fill the cooked shells with this mixture and dust with some powdered sugar. You can also shave some dark chocolate on top, and you can sprinkle with some cocoa also if you like to do that. And today I'm here with Janina Doyle, and she is a British wine educator, expert, and she's also brand ambassador, and she is the host of Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat. And, I was just telling Janina, most of our guests about wine have really been about French or Italian. So it's my pleasure, definitely, to chat a little bit about British wine. So Janina, thank you so much for being here.
No, it's great to be here. And actually, I'm normally on the other side of the podcast asking the questions. So it's kind of nice to be like, I'm just going to sit back and relax. Well, don't ask me too much. Let's not make it too complicated.
So tell us a little bit, I guess, as a primer. So if we want to, just kind of as a beginner to enjoy British wines, can you give us some recommendations on some great British wines and tell us a little bit about them?
Firstly, all of them, go for it. No, but it's one of these things, the industry is growing massively. Now, about 30% is being exported, and one of the most larger markets for exports is USA. So although very little, you are getting some more than many markets.
Wow.
And it's all about English sparkling wine. That is where it's at. Like we could talk all day about some of the quirky, cool things and the still wines coming out of England. And I say England because it's mainly in England and mainly in the south. So we're talking, imagine, so I say English sparkling wine. It's made the same way as champagne. So it's the traditional method. So a second fermentation in bottle. So time on the lees. So when you taste champagne and you get that, croissant, that biscuity, yeasty creaminess that you get with champagne, you get the exact same thing with English sparkling wine. And to put it into context, this is the soils all in the south of England. They're on the same Paris basin, if we talk in geological terms, as Champagne. So the same chalky soils. So there's a lot of similarities, and about 70% of the wines coming out of, I say, Great Britain, but like literally 98% is in England. So 70% of those wines is English sparkling. So everybody listening in America, it's all about the fizz. You got to literally get popping, get cracking. Get a bottle.
So literally. Is there like a couple that you would recommend for us to try?
Yeah. I tell you, I'm going to recommend two. I mean, I could literally recommend all day, but I'm going to recommend two because I am 99.9% sure that they are in America. One is Nye Timber. And any English wine expert will talk to you about the Nye Timber effect. So this is basically, imagine they were on their second vintage when they produced a 1993, their classic cuvee, which sells for here now around £35 a bottle. And it won best sparkling wine of the world with the International Wine Spirit Challenge. So people started paying attention. Anyway, they've got better and better and better. They're the most quintessential wine estate in England. Like King Henry VIII used to own the Nye Timber estate. It was mentioned in the Doomsday books. I mean, I know that some Americans like history and English history and the royal family, like this is the one to go for. And the quality's only just got better and better. So 2018, the female winemaker, Cherry Spriggs, won Best Sparkling Winemaker of the World. And she was the first non-champagne winemaker and first woman to win, and that was with International Wine Challenge. So Nye Timber is definitely one to try and tick off your list, and you should be able to find some.
That sounds really interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
And you said there was a second one too? Or?
Okay. So second one of my personal favorites,
Yes.
Ridgeview. And both of these are down in the south of England. Ridgeview started just a few years after. So Nightingale actually started planting in 1988. So, I mean, we've actually been around for a while.
But, yes.
So, you know, but Ridgeview came about, started planting in 1995. Both of these wineries are entirely dedicated to sparkling wine only. So they plant Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. So the 3 champagne varieties. So that's their focus, and that's all you're going to get with them. And Ridgeview themselves, I mean, they get served at the royal banquets by the Queen. In recently, they've won Best Winemaker and Best Wine Producer as well, you know. So these are the 2. And Ridgeview, I believe, is the highest exported wine out of the country. So that one may be the easiest one, fingers crossed, to find in America. But definitely check those out, because I think that will give you the best example of what England can do, and they by far compete perfectly with champagne. It's not a step down. They are
they do. Wow. So
Absolutely.
that's what I was going to ask, like, what's the difference between, say, a French champagne and an English sparkling? So you're saying they can compete very well with them.
100%. I mean, if you say the difference, remember England is about 0.5 degrees Celsius cooler. So the idea is that with champagne, they're slightly richer, and say English sparkling wine might be a little bit crisper, and say the less ripe flavors like green apples. However, with global warming and climate change, if anything, we're now in this perfect position of great temperature. And I know that champagne are potentially worried that it's going to get too warm. So but in terms of flavor profile, they are made the same way, and they are so similar. And because of those chalky soils, that finesse, and I'm going to get very wine geeky now, but the minerality that is in champagne that we love, we have it in English sparkling wine. And there are traditional method wines made all over the world. You have Schramsberg, amazing traditional method in California. That's really, really fantastic. You have loads, but they're not going to have quite the same soils. So if you want the closest thing to champagne, but it's still unique in its own way, then English sparkling wine is one to try.
That's really very, very interesting. And then I guess kind of quickly, because we don't have much time, but any suggestions on some quick things to pair with these 2?
Well, champagne in general, my favorite pairing, and this is such a British pairing, fish and chips. I mean,
you go.
You've got to be able to get fish and chips. Do you have fish and chip shops around the corner?
Yes, they're all over. But I do want to say, so my listening audience is actually not just in the US. We're in France, we're in Australia, we're a little in the UK and Canada. So I do have, I mean, the largest portion of my listening audience is the US, about 70%, but the rest is kind of divided up all around the world. But in the US, yes, fish and chips is, and I know when I've been to England, the fish and chips there are just amazing. So
just like with champagne, English sparkling wine, is that really high acidity, that beautiful effervescence, that freshness. It just cuts through fattiness and oil. So anything deep fat fried is just going to be perfect. And of course, champagne and fish, you know, is perfect. So fish and chips is number 1, without a doubt. Anybody wants, and there's something amazing about having a slightly more premium bottle of wine. These are not cheap, unfortunately, are they? Whether it's champagne, whether it's English sparkling wine, you're probably looking at $50 plus, whatever. But then you have just a nice, just not very expensive fish and chips, and you can just sit back and relax, and the 2, you know, opposites attract, you know. And
that would really make sense, because I know with Italian wines, a lot of times it makes sense when you pair them with where that wine comes from, with a local traditional food in the sense. So that would make a lot of sense. And I could just see, oh my gosh, that would be absolutely yummy. So it would make a really yummy pairing. That's great. So Janina Doyle, tell us where can we find you?
You can find me. I mean, I'm now I'm caught off guard. Where can you find me? So the podcast is called Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, and it's on Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, it's on everywhere. And you can go to my website because I do virtual wine tastings, of course, for those that are not in the same country, and I do wine education classes, so parties and fun, whether it be corporate or private. You can just go to the website www.eatsleepwinerepeat.co.uk. It's pretty easy.
Yes,
keep
definitely.
Eating, keep sleeping, keep whining, and just repeat it. That's it.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense. I love that title. Well, Janina, I'm sure we'll have you back again. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And definitely check out her podcast and blog, Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat. Thanks, Janina. We'll be talking to you.
Thanks.
So today we have as a special guest Robert Boog, who is the author of a book. It's about one of my favorite, I guess, people in history and Shakespeare. But it's kind of something with a twist you're probably not expecting this topic, but it also helps us bring to light, being compassionate for people with mental health issues also. And the book is called Shakey's Madness. So I was really surprised when I started reading about, what the book is talking about, because this is one facet of Shakespeare I was not aware of. So Robert, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So I guess start us out. How did you start uncovering this information about Shakespeare?
During the pandemic, here in California, everything was closed.
Right.
So I happened to be listening to someone on Twitter. It was Sir Patrick Stewart. And he was reading a Shakespeare sonnet, and it talked about, despair and gloom and death. And also at the same time, I was a little later, I was watching TV, and there was a commercial for Latuda. And Latuda treats bipolar depression or bipolar disorder.
Right.
And so I thought, it sounds like old Shakey might have had bipolar disorder. So that's kind of how it kind of started from there. And also around that same time, I learned that my niece was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And it was kind of like, this perfect storm, I guess, where I started investigating it. Yeah. And I was thinking, she's a straight A student.
Right.
And all of a sudden she went off the deep end kind of, and was hospitalized for a week.
Oh, wow.
And so I started learning a little bit more about it. And then there has always been, for the last 100 years, there's been a question about the authorship of Shakespeare.
Right.
So some people believe it was the Earl of Oxford, and other people believe it was this guy from Stratford, the boy genius who made it big on the London stage. And the more I read about the Earl of Oxford, here was a guy who, when he was 20 years old, inherited like $70 million. And 10 years later, he lost it all, or he spent it all.
Oh, wow.
And that's actually, and it kind of rang a bell, because that's one of the symptoms of bipolar disorder. People that are like spendaholics.
Oh, wow.
And so the more I kept reading, and because I was aware of these symptoms or researching it, and and so they just there's just a number of things that started adding up in his favor. And then when you read through the sonnets, especially, this is kind of like a personal diary of the real author.
Right.
And what's interesting about bipolar disorder is that a psychiatrist, when my niece was being treated, would have her write poetry in a journal.
Wow.
And so again, it kind of put, two and two together, and I kept thinking, this seems like, this could be the guy. But then you have these experts on Shakespeare,
right,
who insist, no, it's got to be the man from Stratford. But it's, I kept getting the feeling like, like if someone was murdered and you were the last person to see that person alive,
right,
with the spouse or something, and you had this uneasy feeling about the spouse, and yet everyone says, no, he has an airtight alibi kind of thing.
right.
So it was kind of like that, where I kept on investigating.
Uh-huh.
And actually, when you sent me an email suggesting that it could be someone Italian, because Shakespeare sets a number of his plays in different parts
Italian
of
cities.
Italy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it turns out Edward de Vere took a trip to Italy in 1576, and he visited, or he actually lived in Venice, where the Merchant of Venice takes place. He visited Padua. He visited all these different cities that if you were to take a map and put a pin on every play that takes place in Shakespeare's world,
right,
these were places that he visited. So
oh
it's kind of
wow,
like you get the feeling that he spoke fluent Italian,
yes,
and he was an aristocrat. So he learned fencing, how sword fighting,
right,
poetry. I mean, he started learning Greek at age 4, and he graduated from Queen's College, Cambridge, when he was 9 years old. So you're talking about a pretty bright kid, and he graduated from Oxford University at age 16.
oh wow. So the theory is then, because what I told you about that I had actually heard, it was a presentation at some kind of a conference for books that are retired. I think he's a retired professor made. He made his theory was that Shakespeare, whose last name meant Shakespeare in Italian, they translated it to English. The theory was that Shakespeare's family was exiled from Italy because the father wrote a big piece against the Vatican, so they moved to England. And the theory was also he claimed that there were lots of people saying that Shakespeare spoke with this strange accent. So, hence maybe he was Italian. And also he invented a lot of the theater, what we do in the theater now. And a lot of it, there was a similarity to what they were doing in Sicily that he didn't really invent. It was actually being already done in Sicily, and he just brought the world's, attention to it. So anyway, that was his whole theory. So you're saying, though, it's an English guy that traveled to Italy and he wrote the things, right? Is that what you're saying? He
Yes.
had bipolar.
Correct. When he was 12 years old, his father died, and his father had worked as the Secretary of State to Queen Mary, who was before Queen Elizabeth. Now, Queen Mary, we call Bloody Mary. So after his death, when he was 12 years old, he was sent to live with Queen Elizabeth because his father had died. So he lived at her Secretary of State. His name was William Cecil. And William Cecil was the most powerful man in all of England for at least 40 years.
Yes.
And he had the world's greatest library at the time. And the other, his Oxford's uncle who lived with him was a man by the name of Arthur Golding.
Yes.
And Arthur Golding was the first person to translate Ovid's 15-book masterpiece called Metamorphoses from Latin into English. So in Shakespeare's writings, you see all of these references to Ovid and Metamorphoses. And the British Museum, interestingly, says that Shakespeare, according to reading of The Tempest, he must have been familiar with both versions of Golding's 15-book version plus the Latin 15-book version. So he had to have read 30 books.
Right.
Now, there's a website. It's called the Folger Library website.
Right.
The Folger Library has the largest collection in all of the United States and all of the world outside of England.
Right.
They're located in Washington, D.C. And there they actually have all kinds of interesting things online that you can see for yourself. And one of the things that we see is that in 1570, William Shakespeare of Stratford upon Avon, his father John moved the family to a farm,
right,
a 14-acre farm located 5 miles outside of Stratford upon Avon. So Shakespeare was born in 1566. 1570, they moved to this farm, and experts say, you know, or the traditional Shakespeare scholars say that he would have been going to this grammar school in town. Right. But can you imagine a boy walking 5 miles to school and then somehow, I guess, reading 15 books in Latin by candlelight and then lugging them? It doesn't make sense.
No,
if you really
it doesn't.
Think about it.
It does not.
So his education is not really on par with what researchers today tell us that he must have had. So therefore, it doesn't really make sense.
Obviously everybody should get a copy of Shakey's Madness so they can check it out themselves. But your research points to then that Shakespeare probably had bipolar disorder. Is that what we're going to conclude probably?
Yeah, it's not really Shakespeare, the man from Stratford upon Avon, that had the bipolar disorder. It was the Earl of Oxford.
The Earl of Oxford. So that's right. I should have gotten that from the rest of our conversation. And what you're also saying, concluding, is that the Earl of Oxford was probably the real author.
Yeah. And because bipolar disorder is rare, it's only, it's increasing, but currently only 2.5% of the world's population has bipolar disorder.
Yes.
Now, bipolar disorder used to be called, schizophrenia or manic depression.
Right.
So it seems logical that if there's only one person, probably, royally connected, who lives in London, who has bipolar disorder,
it would have been the Earl of Oxford.
So it's kind of like it kind of proves that this is the person. It's not someone from Italy. It's not the man from Stratford. It's not Francis Bacon or any of the other candidates that have been put forward. It is only someone who, and the other interesting thing about bipolar disorder is that we have always heard of a paranoid schizophrenic. People who tend to have the disease tend to be a little paranoid.
Right.
And they lack in self-confidence.
Yes.
And so using someone else as a front man or using it, I think it started out, he wanted a pen name. And then what happened is in 1598, a book came out called Pallidus Tamia, where this author praises both Shakespeare and Edward de Vere or Oxford. And Shakespeare is mentioned like 9 times.
Wow.
And I think that he kind of panicked at that, and he had created this, monster. But his printer, was a man by the name of Richard Field, and Richard Field was from Stratford upon Avon. And was only 3 years older than William Shakespeare. It's kind of weird. If you ever, or your listeners do a Google search of just Shakespeare's 5 signatures, and if you just look at them for yourself, you can see that it doesn't really look like someone who wrote 1 million words.
Right. It's really, I think William Shakespeare, unfortunately, our time is up. Unfortunately, I could stay here, and because Shakespeare was such an interesting historical person, I'm sure there's so many things to read into, and a lot of things that we don't know about, that happened in the past. And that's very interesting what you had started to say about all is like the signatures, and very interesting that this other person could have most likely been the actual author to what he said. But anyway, so Robert, we can find all this info and more on Shakey's Madness, the book. And do you have a website or anything for this?
Yeah, you can just go to my robertboog.com.
Okay.
Or you can search my name on Amazon if you wanted to find it there.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting topic, and definitely takes a lot of time, and sounds like it makes a really interesting read also for those that love Shakespeare. And it's just a really fascinating topic from the past. So, all right, Robert, thank you so much for being here, and thanks for sharing Shakey's Madness with us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Maria.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Maria Liberati Show and joining me. And thanks to my producer, Britton Roselle, my production intern, Allie Troy, my guest this week, Janina Doyle, British wine expert, and Robert Boog, author of Shakey's Madness. And don't forget to like and share this month's episode. Review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, take a screenshot, share it on social media, and you'll be entered in a giveaway. For this month's giveaway is products from Absolutely Gluten Free. They have really delicious products, whether you eat gluten free or not. You'll love their products. And you'll also have a chance to win a copy of one of my books in the Basic Art of Italian Cooking book series. So don't forget, share that. And you can find me at marialiberati.com, on Twitter at Maria Liberati with a capital M, on Facebook at Chef Maria Liberati, on Instagram at Maria Liberati, on Pinterest at Maria Liberati, and on LinkedIn at M Liberati, and my Roku channel, The Basic Art of Italian Cooking by Maria Liberati. Until next time, peace, love, and pasta.